Good afternoon. Welcome to the Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 6 newspaper articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express and discussing them. The handout for the same will be available in the description of this video for your kind perusal. Please have a look at that. The first article that we'll take up is related to India-Japan relations, as the Japanese Prime Minister was on the official visit to India and at least 16 agreements were signed as the two countries seek to deepen the bilateral ties. The second article is related to the crisis in the fisheries sector of India, as the Food and Agriculture Organization warned that many major fish stocks in India are already fully exploited, whereas the Central Marine Fisheries Research Institute observed that the Indian marine fisheries are largely sustainable. In the mains value addition section, we'll have a discussion regarding the data and the government steps regarding the informal workers in India. Additionally, we'll take up 4 articles in the prelims pointer section which will be helpful for your prelims preparation. The first article is related to India-Japan relations, as the Japanese Prime Minister was on the first official visit to India and at least 16 agreements were signed. The two countries are seeking to deepen their bilateral ties and to ring-fence their ties from the multilateral accords. Therefore, we'll discuss the evolution of the India-Japan relations, the significance of Japan for India, the challenges that the bilateral ties face, and a few suggestions in this regard. This is important in GS2 under the topic Effect of Politics and Policies of Developed and Developing Countries on India's Interests and Indian Diaspora. The Japan's security situation has been evolving, and it is being impacted by 4 factors primarily. The first factor is USA. As the US is no more seen as the trusted security partner, the security ally, the traditional security ally of Japan, as sometimes the actions and the promises of US President Trump are not in harmony. The second factor is China, as Japan's dependence upon China regarding its external trade has remained largely over the last few decades. At the same time, China has laid persistent and continuous claims over the Senkaku Islands. The third factor is North Korea. The North Korean military capabilities, especially its missile capabilities, have expanded in the recent past, which again disrupts Japan's security calculus. The fourth factor is Russia, as the Russia-China cooperations have also deepened in the recent past, especially the military cooperation. It also affects the security calculations of Japan. Therefore, for them, India-Japan ties become very crucial. Similarly, for India also, India is bordered by an adversary in the west, by a competitor and sometimes an adversary in the north also. Therefore, the India-Japan ties are crucial. And even before the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, under whom the India-Japan ties got a significant boost, there was a strategic reset under the previous Japanese Prime Ministers, for example, Hatoyama and Kan. And the Japan-India ties are based upon the shared goals of regional stability and balancing China. Therefore, first let us observe the evolution of the ties between India and Japan. The first era can be considered as the era of the strategic reset. That is of significance for us, starting from 2009 onwards under Prime Minister Yukio Hatoyama, under whom the reset starts. And the Japanese foreign policy was recalibrated then, and it was recalibrated towards the East Asia, that it should be focused upon the East Asian community vision also. And here India became a natural partner, because India was a rising democracy, and therefore the investments started into India significantly. The JICA investments, the International Cooperation Agency, for example, the investments in the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor. But at the same time, Japan was cautious in terms of expanding its defense cooperation with India, because it did not want to antagonize China, counter China directly at that time. The second era can be considered as the era of the strategic consolidation. The consolidation happened under Prime Minister Kan, the Japanese Prime Minister Kan, who solidified the ties, for example, the participation in the Malabar exercise for the first time. There was the starting of the talks of the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. There was the initiation of the talks for the civil nuclear cooperation between India and Japan. The next was the era of strategic elevation. The elevation of the ties happened primarily under the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe from 2012 to 2020. For example, Japan became the permanent participant in the Malabar exercises. and India was made a cornerstone of Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific strategy as well. There was annual 2+2 foreign and defense ministerial dialogues, which led to defense cooperation and even technology transfer as well. Therefore, there were major investments in infrastructure in this era. For example, the investments in the Mumbai-Ahmedabad high-speed rail corridor and the technology transfer as well. Plus, there was the promotion of cultural diplomacy also. For example, 2017 was celebrated as the India-Japan Year of Friendly Exchanges. Simultaneously, there was the era of pragmatic continuity after this. The era of pragmatic continuity, for example, under Prime Minister Suga, who continued the Abe's vision of free and open Indo-Pacific, and then Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. Fumio Kishida focused upon the cooperation in cybersecurity, deepening of the supply chains as well as green energy. Therefore, he even committed for about $42 billion investment for the diversification of the supply chains away from China. Therefore, increased focus upon India and launched the Japan-India Digital Partnership. Under the Japanese Prime Minister Ishiba, there was focus upon the defense and multilateral engagement, and new areas of cooperation were explored. For example, the collaboration in space technology and satellite technology. Now let us observe the significance of India-Japan ties, why they are so crucial. From the point of view of geoeconomy, Japan had given major financial commitments that they will be investing in India. They had given the financial commitments to invest 10 trillion Japanese yen in India over the next decade. And Japan is also a major foreign direct investor source for India, the 5th largest FDI source. And in fiscal year 2023-2024, the FDI investments were close to $3 billion. And similarly, it is important for strategic economic diversification, because Japan also wants to diversify its supply chains away from China, and for that India becomes the natural route. Plus, it is significant for the Economic Security Initiative as well. The Economic Security Initiative focuses upon the areas like cybersecurity and critical minerals, also green energy, critical minerals and semiconductors. Plus, through the strategic financing for security, for example, the Japan's overseas security assistance, there is the alignment of the framework that the financing is given in those areas where there are shared security concerns, and India and Japan share the security concerns, for example, the concerns with respect to China. Geostrategically looking also, Japan-India ties are significant. For example, earlier the Japanese exercised a pacifist restraint. Now there is more security engagement. What does that mean? Post the World War II, through the Article 9 of their 1947 Constitution, Japan did not build any armed forces. The land forces, the naval forces and the air forces were restricted under the Japanese Constitution itself. But the successive governments interpreted that clause as if it meant that the self-defense forces were allowed. And this continued until Shinzo Abe changed it completely and came up with new principles under which even the defense technology transfer was also allowed, which finally led to the 2025 frigates sales from Japan to Australia. Therefore, Japan's security calculus has evolved from being exercising of the pacifist restraint to an active security engagement, which will be crucial for India also, as it will help India in getting the defense technology from Japan. Plus, there has been an enhanced defense and security collaboration. For example, the ensuring of free and open Indo-Pacific. Therefore, various exercises, for example, the exercise Malabar, in which not only India, Japan, but also US and Australia participate. The exercise Milan, which is a multilateral naval exercise. The JIMEX, which is a bilateral maritime exercise. And the Dharma Guardian, which is an army exercise. Plus, there is importance of the operational convergence, because when there is collaboration between India and Japan from the security perspective, from the defense perspective, there will be also the interoperability of the security platforms, therefore easier convergence in case there is need for collaboration of security to counter a third party adversary in future. Plus, it is important as both the countries share the strategic concerns over China. Both China, India and Japan have concerns from China. For example, China has shown increasing military assertiveness. For example, the assertiveness in the South China Sea as well as the East China Sea, their naval presence has been increasing. Simultaneously, in the Indian Ocean also, China has been expanding its naval presence, building bases across the Indian Ocean. Plus, there are territorial tensions also. For example, the dispute between China and Japan regarding the Senkaku Islands, and between India and China, we already know across the line of actual control. For example, the Galwan Valley clashes in 2020. Geopolitically looking also, India-Japan ties are significant because both seek to have a rules-based order, especially in the Indo-Pacific region, and this relationship is not a zero-sum engagement. This relationship is not for creating dependencies. It is for creating resilience for each other. Therefore, it is a non-zero-sum engagement, and India is the cornerstone of Japan's Indo-Pacific strategy. And for India also, Japan can be a strategic anchor. Why? Because US has shown unpredictable behavior. With China, we have competition. So in the Indo-Pacific region, Japan can be our strategic anchor, which is a trusted ally, a predictable ally, and therefore ensure that India maintains its strategic autonomy, and Japan's presence will also lend stability to the Quad, because the other members of the Quad have not shown as much assertiveness or willingness to push the platform forward. Technologically as well, the relation is important, as there has been advanced technology transfer from Japan to India that showcases deep trust between the two countries. For example, the technology for the high-speed rail, the Shinkansen rail transfer from the Mumbai to Ahmedabad bullet train corridor. And there is an upgradation of the digital partnership also. For example, the support lent towards the development of the India's startup ecosystem, artificial intelligence, etc. And there are other areas where the two countries share collaboration. For example, the maritime domain awareness, and the India-Japan ties can serve as a model for regional cooperation for the other countries as well, and the ties are based upon a long-term strategic intent rather than a short-term security objective. And there is significant tourism links between the two countries and diaspora as well, as more than 50,000 Indians already work in Japan. And recently there was an agreement between the state of Haryana and Japan, whereby Haryana will be sending about 50,000 skilled professionals to Japan over the next 5 years, as there is a shortage of skilled workers in Japan currently. Additionally, the India-Japan relations are significant for the development of our northeastern region. For example, there is a strategic alignment between the visions of the two countries. India has the Act East policy, and through the Act East policy, we also want the development of our Northeast region so that we can build better connectivity ties to the Southeast Asian region. And Japan has the free and open Indo-Pacific, both are in alignment. Therefore, Japan has given loans and invested in the Northeast region of India. For example, the assistance through the JICA as well as the overseas development assistance. And the focus has been upon the infrastructure building in the Northeast, for example, taking up of road projects. For example, the Northeast Road Connectivity Improvement Project, in which Japan has invested, enhancing the connectivity in the region, and also going for urban development. For example, investing in the water and sanitation projects in Assam. Similarly, investments in the environmental projects from Assam. For example, the Sustainable Forest Management Project in Tripura. The energy cooperation is also significant, especially with the focus upon the Northeast region. For example, giving of green loans by Japan, the green loans to the tune of 120 billion yen for the production of clean energy, renewable energy. Simultaneously, the green ammonia, promoting the export of green ammonia from the Northeast region. The investments in the bamboo initiative, which focuses upon the development of bamboo infrastructure through the hub and spoke model, expanding the development across the region. The healthcare investments by Japan in Northeast, for example, the building of the medical college and hospital in Kohima in Nagaland. Similarly, the people-to-people ties have also been focused upon. For example, the educational programs are promoted by Japan, like the teaching of Japanese language courses in in the universities of Assam. The historical connection is also promoted. For example, the preservation of the World War II era monuments and the sites, historical sites in Manipur and Nagaland by Japan. And the recent commitment in terms of, for example, the Advantage Assam 2.0 summit, through which again Japan committed for more investments in northeast region of India. Now recently again Japan has underscored its attention to the northeast region of India by connecting them with the relevant partners and the regional organizations of the Bay of Bengal region. Therefore the BIMSTEC is mentioned as the partner organization for Japan, and Japan has major investments in Bangladesh and Thailand, connecting these products including the Matarbari port in the Cox's Bazar through the industrial value chain with India's northeast, which will boost not only connectivity but also the trade ties in the region. Now let's also observe what is the significance of India for Japan. Why are they investing so much in India apart from their security calculations? One, India has a demographic advantage. India is a young demography and a rising democracy which has a demographic advantage. Whereas Japan has an aging population, therefore we can provide them with skilled professionals. And India also has a huge market. Japan has a huge manufacturing capability, therefore they can export their goods, their precision engineering goods to India. India also presents Japan with an investment opportunity. India is seen as a golden investment opportunity as it is an emerging economy with a growing population and a growing demand. Simultaneously, we can also provide them with raw material for their industries. For example, we provided them the iron ore after the World War II to aid in the reconstruction of Japan to overcome the devastation of Japan during the World War II. But there are certain challenges in the bilateral relations. One of the primary challenges is that the bilateral trade, it has remained low. Although we have the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, but still the trade remains low because of several factors. For example, Japan has various known tariff barriers, stringent quality standards which are imposed upon the exports of India into Japan. Plus the trade is in the favor of Japan. That is, India imports more than India exports to Japan. Therefore, the trade has been just about $22 billion as of fiscal year 2024. Plus, there has been a strategic divergence also. For example, the stance on China for the two countries has remained different. For example, India has been vocal in the criticism of China with respect to the Chinese overtures along the line of actual control. Therefore, we have remained assertive in terms of our territorial integrity along the line of actual control. Whereas regarding Chinese actions in terms of the South China Sea or East China Sea, our criticism has been a little more muted. Similarly, the stance on the Russia-Ukraine war has been slightly divergent. For example, Japan supported the sanctions upon Russia, whereas India could not do so because we wanted to import oil from Russia, we wanted to ensure our energy security, and we wanted it at lower prices. Also, there is divergence with respect to the ties with the USA. For example, Japan has been a security alliance with the USA, whereas India has maintained its strategic autonomy. Another challenge was with respect to the Osaka track as well. The Osaka track was the proposal of the Japanese at the G20 summit to introduce plurilateral negotiations regarding the digital trade for harmonizing of the rules, the laws regarding the cross-border data flows. It was boycotted by India because we focused more upon the data localization. Additionally, there has been a challenge of delays in the implementation of the projects. The implementation of projects through the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, or even in India also, the high-speed rail projects in India have been delayed. Now, what are the suggestions that we can give to improve the bilateral cooperation? First, we need to have more coherence in the Indo-Pacific region. For that, we can strengthen the institutional mechanisms. For example, the Quad grouping. For that, Japan can help India. And there has to be cooperation in the other emerging areas also. For example, cooperation in the renewable energy, semiconductor chains development, supply chain development, critical minerals supply, etc. Plus, the implementation of the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement has to be reviewed because the bilateral trade between the two countries can be increased further. For that, there can be a push from the side of the businesses. For that, there has to be an improvement in the B2B ties, the business to business links, as well as the people to people ties. Now coming to the recent developments, the USA appears less enthusiastic about the Quad grouping between India, Japan, Australia and US, and is unsure even of the nomenclature Indo-Pacific in its strategy. Whereas India and Japan, we have declared a joint intent to continue with the updated free and open Indo-Pacific posture. Therefore, we have ring-fenced our bilateral ties from the multilateral arrangements, and hence there was the signing of at least 16 agreements, particularly to enhance the cooperation along the maritime energy transport value chain, because both sides have faced problems regarding the safety of the energy carrying ships and sailors during the US-Israel war against Iran. Therefore, the two sides have agreed to build naval platforms to enhance the maritime domain awareness and surveillance. There is a mains practice question also. The India-Japan relations have evolved into a strategic partnership rooted in shared democratic values and mutual interests in the Indo-Pacific. Examine the significance of India-Japan ties in the current global context. Discuss the major challenges impeding the deeper cooperation between the two nations. Please try to write it. The next article is related to the crisis in the fisheries sector in India. As the Food and Agriculture Organization has observed that many major fish stocks in India are already fully exploited, whereas the observations of the Central Marine Fisheries Research Institute say otherwise. They say that the Indian marine fisheries are largely sustainable. Therefore, we'll discuss the challenges regarding the Indian fisheries sector as well as the government steps taken in this regard. This is important in GS3 under the topic Indian economy. First, let us observe the significance of the fisheries sector for India. In India, there are about 2.36 million hectares of ponds and tanks. We have a very long coastline, more than 11,000 kilometers, and we have about 1.1 million hectares of brackish water also. The fisheries sector provides the livelihood to about 28 million people in India, and we are the second largest globally in the aquaculture industry. When we look at the fisheries sector in particular, we are the third largest producer, fourth largest exporter. Therefore, we are contributing in terms of the global output, eighth largest in number, and it contributes about 1% to India's GDP. And 25% of the fisheries are marine fisheries. In terms of the total production, we can observe that the maximum production comes from the Andhra Pradesh, followed by West Bengal and then Gujarat. If we observe the top export destinations, we are exporting maximum to USA, followed by China, Japan, then Vietnam and Thailand. The growth rate has also been significant, almost in double digits. For the prawns, fishes, etc., it is closer to 10%. And it also provides the food security as well as employment to the fishermen in India, and contributing to the food security for the Indian population as well. Now let's observe the challenges that are being faced by the fisheries sector in India. The fisheries production, although in India, has been increasing, but it has been largely unsustainable, because the fishes production over the past 2 decades has increased in terms of the numbers in lakh tons. It has increased. Even if you don't remember the numbers, you can draw a graph like this showing the increase in the fish production in India over the past 2 decades. Similarly, the seafood exports have also increased. The seafood export value has increased over the past 2 decades. There has been a quantum jump in the seafood export value also, but this has been because of overfishing or unsustainable fishing. What is meant by that? That we are fishing at a rate which is higher than the rate at which the fishes are able to replenish themselves, because the fishes also need time for reproduction, for their multiplication, and we are fishing at a rate which is higher than the replenishment rate for the fishes. Therefore, it leads to the depletion of the stock. It gets exhausted. When the large fishes stock gets exhausted, we start fishing lower down the food chain. We start fishing for smaller fishes, even going for sardines and squids also, which ultimately leads to the complete exhaustion of the fish stock. Additionally, there are illegal subsidies also given by various countries, which again promote overfishing or unsustainable fishing. Plus, in terms of the observations of ILO, 3 decades back, just about 10% of the global fishing stocks were being overfished or overexploited. But now there is more than 1/3, around 33-34% of the global fish stocks which are overfished. Simultaneously, there is bycatch also. For example, the other varieties, other species are also caught. which are not intended to be caught in the fishing, because we are using bottom trawler methods which are sweeping away all the marine organisms, even the ones which we do not want to catch, which again leads to the degradation of the entire marine ecosystem. Plus there is illegal fishing also. What is that? For example, to allow the replenishment of the fishing stocks, around 2 months in a year, the fishing is forbidden. But when there is a depletion of the fishing stocks of certain varieties, their demand increases, which leads to the fishing of particularly those varieties in those months when the fishing is forbidden, which is illegal fishing. Plus the extension services in India, they are poor, that the information support for the fishermen is less, the credit support is also poor, the infrastructure is also not developed. For example, there is insufficient availability of the quality seed, especially for the inland fisheries. At the same time, the cold chain infrastructure is poorly developed, which leads to wastages, and the post-harvest losses are there. Plus the price discovery mechanisms are also not there, which leads to poor remuneration for the fishermen, which again leads to the incentivization of overfishing to ensure that they can make both their ends meet. Now, what are the steps that the government has taken to promote the fisheries and aquaculture in India? There is the Blue Revolution 2.0, that is the holistic promotion of the inland fisheries, the aquaculture, mariculture, as well as the marine fisheries. It is overseen by the National Fisheries Development Board. Then there is the Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana. The goal of this is to increase the production of the fishes, the exports of the fishes, to ensure that sufficient jobs are there for the fishermen, and also to increase the income for the fishermen. For that, the quality is focused upon. The fish farmers producer organizations are set up to ensure that the economies of scale can be taken advantage of by the fishermen. The Fisheries Aquaculture Infrastructure Development Fund incentivizes the development of the fisheries in a sustainable manner. There is the setting of integrated aqua parks. The artificial reefs are also deployed to ensure the sustainability in the marine ecosystem. And the Pradhan Mantri Matsya Kisan Samriddhi Sah Yojana is also there. The objectives of the Blue Revolution holistically were to increase the overall fish production in a responsible and sustainable manner, to modernize the fisheries with special focus on the new technologies, to ensure food security and nutrition security, as well as to generate employment and export earnings, and also therefore to ensure inclusive development. The Pradhan Mantri Matsya Kisan Samriddhi Sah Yojana aims to ensure gradual formalization of the unorganized fisheries through work-based digital identities under the National Fisheries Digital Platform, and also ensuring greater access to the institutional finance, including the working capital, so that the mechanization can be done, providing one-time incentive for one crop cycle to aqua farmers for purchasing of aquaculture insurance. Incentives are given for the performance grants for improving the fisheries sector value chain efficiencies, to ensure that more jobs are created in the fisheries sector, especially the inland fisheries. And the incentives are provided for the integration and the consolidation of the fisheries value chains as well. The other steps taken by the government include the National Genetic Improvement Facility for the shrimp breeding, that is to ensure that the indigenous species are promoted over the invasive species, and also the development is done for the indigenous species so that we can reduce our dependence upon one species. The National Surveillance Program for the aquatic animal diseases is to ensure that there is a timely detection, and therefore information can be provided for the tackling of the diseases for the marine organisms. The Kisan Credit Card facility has been extended to the fishermen as well. The new areas are also brought in, for example, the saline and brackish waters, reservoirs and flood plains, so that there is a conversion of the wastelands into productive lands. The eGopal app, that is to connect the farmers directly, therefore removing the middlemen and sending the information to the farmers. The Sagar Parikrama resolves the challenges faced by the fishermen. Additionally, for sustainable fishing especially, there are various initiatives taken up. For example, the National Policy on Marine Fisheries Fisheries 2017, which places an emphasis on sustainability. Therefore, uniform fishing ban is imposed, that the ban is for allowing sufficient time for the replenishment of the fish stocks. There is a prohibition of the destructive fishing methods, for example, the prohibition of usage of such trawlers which will adversely impact the entire marine ecosystem. There is a promotion of sustainable practices and the climate resilient coastal fishermen villages program. Now, the government of India has claimed that the Indian marine fisheries are largely sustainable and the overfishing is avoided. It is based upon the observations of the Central Marine Fisheries Research Institute observations. The Research Institute observed that 91% out of the 135 fish stocks which were evaluated are observed to be sustainable in nature, and the most commercial stocks are in good health. But this observation relies upon the landing data. This is not the at-sea assessment. The at-sea assessment is more costly, but it is more accurate. The landing data is not reliable. Whereas the Food and Agriculture Organization has observed that India's marine production has plateaued and the most major full stocks have been fully exploited. And this has been because of unregulated access, which led to overcapacity. For example, the medium small trawlers, they are competing now with the impoverished poor small scale fishers as well. This has led to a decline of the inshore ecosystems. For example, the fishermen have themselves claimed that the catches have been consistently coming down. The species that they used to catch earlier, they are no more available. The formerly available species, they have disappeared. And there has been a destruction of the entire inshore benthic environment. Not just the fisheries, not just overfishing, because we have also disrupted the food stocks which used to replenish the fish stocks. And India is also having a narrow continental shelf. The continental shelf is the most productive zone for the development of the fisheries, whereas India's continental shelf is quite narrow. The broadest one is in Gujarat and parts of Maharashtra, but overall it is still narrow. The causes of the decline of inshore ecosystems are that we have built the dams in the major rivers, and these dams block the flow of the land-based nutrients which the rivers would have carried towards the continental shelf. Plus, there has been an ongoing destruction of the mangroves. The mangroves are the breeding grounds for the fishes. On top of it, there is pollution also which is carried by the river onto the continental shelves also. For example, the pollution from the agriculture, pollution from industrial sources, etc. Plus, there is mechanized trawling as well. The semi-industrial trawling was introduced in India since the 1960s majorly. That was introduced as a concept from abroad, but it expanded exponentially because there were practically no entry barriers for the trawlers, and therefore the current fleet expanded to more than 64,000 mechanized fishing vessels. The oversized trawler fleet that plows even the inshore seabeds. Therefore, the small-scale fishers, their livelihood is adversely impacted. Plus, the regulations have been almost non-existent. For example, although we have a 2-month ban, that for 2 months there will be no fishing to ensure that there is rejuvenation, to ensure that there is replenishment of the fish stocks. But still, the 5 nautical mile prohibition zone for the mechanized boats, there is no forcefulness. The reason being the states do not have the capacity. The states do not have the staff or the human resources or the craft to patrol the inshore waters. Plus, the fishermen are not included in the management role that could have ensured the implementation, because as the fishing stocks get depleted, their livelihoods are also getting impacted. Plus, the inshore ecology is also degraded, and that leads to a push towards the offshore, towards the deep sea zones also. And the potential of the inshore waters therefore is wasted. And because the inshore waters do not give enough fish stocks, therefore the fishermen have to spend extra fuel, they have to spend on technology costs to reach the distant waters to go for deep sea fishing as well. Now, what are the suggestions that we can give? First, we need to go for better inshore management, and that can be done by addressing the marine pollution, by curbing the mechanized trawling, as the number of trawlers have increased and their political influence have also increased. Therefore, that needs to be brought down, and the fishermen, they also need to be given a role in the management. And the federal capacity, the state's capacity has to be increased for the management of the fisheries. Plus, the Central Marine Fisheries Research Institute study that can also be on the actual condition of the benthic environment, not just the fishing status, overfishing or unsustainable fishing merely. There is a mains practice question also. The fisheries sector is crucial for India's food security, employment generation and export earnings. Discuss the significance of the fisheries sector in India and the major government initiatives taken to strengthen the sector. Please try to write it. Now in the mains value addition section, we'll have a discussion around the informal workers in India. First, let us have a look at some data related to the informal workers. The informal workers, around 50% are employed in the agriculture and allied agri activities as per the Periodic Labour Force Survey 2022 observation, and about 15 to 20% are employed in the construction and manufacturing sectors. Also, just about 10% of the workers in the informal sector are able to earn more than 10,000 rupees per month as per the data from eShram portal in 2023. Remaining 90% of the workers in the informal sector earn less than 10,000 rupees per month. Women are earning 35% less wages as compared to men in the informal sector as per the ILO observation of 2022. Less than 20% workers in the informal sector have the access to the social security benefits as per the NSSO, the National Sample Survey Organization, as of 2021, and they do not have access to pensions, health insurance and maternity benefit. Less than 20% have access to these. More than 100 million are migrant workers in the informal sector as per the Economic Survey 2021, and the states of Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Odisha and Jharkhand, they are the dominant states in terms of the supply of the low wage informal sector workers. The gig and platform economy has been expanding as per the Niti Aayog observation of 2022, and the gig workers, they lack social security benefits, they face algorithmic exploitation and they do not have bargaining power. Let us also observe the government steps taken up for the welfare of the informal sector workers. There is the MG Narega, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, which provides for guaranteed employment, guaranteed wage employment in the rural areas to ensure that they have at least the basic minimum income. The Pradhan Mantri Rozgar Protsahan Yojana, it incentivizes the creation of new jobs. It also incentivizes the formalization, the conversion of the informal to the formal sector. The Atmanirbhar Bharat Rozgar Yojana also incentivizes the job creation and seeks to provide the social security benefits for the informal sector. The eShram portal was launched in 2021. It is to maintain a national database, a database of the unorganized workers, so that the government can track them and the government can support the informal workers. For that, an eShram card is issued which has a unique 12-digit number. For the insurance and pension, there are schemes. For example, the Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Jyoti Bima Yojana, that provides for the life insurance. The Pradhan Mantri Suraksha Bima Yojana, providing for the accidental insurance, and the Pradhan Mantri Shram Yogi Man Dhan, providing for pension for small traders and the self-employed professionals. The Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana provides for the free food grains for the beneficiaries under the National Food Security Act. The next article is related to the India-Indonesia relations. This is important in prelims under the topic current events of national and international importance. First, from the prelims point of view, let us have a look at the map of Indonesia. Indonesia lies across the equator. You can observe this from the map, and it has land borders with the countries Malaysia, Papua New Guinea and Timor-Leste. In terms of its physical features, it comprises of more than 17,500 islands, and the 5 main islands are Sumatra, Java, Kalimantan, Borneo, Sulawesi and Papua. And the Indonesia is part of the Ring of Fire. Therefore, it experiences frequent earthquakes. There are more than 100 active volcanoes there, and the significant ones are at the Mount Merapi and Mount Krakatoa. The Mount Tambatora is the active stratovolcano. The highest point in Indonesia is the Puncak Jaya in Papua, that is having a height of 16,500 feet, and it is the highest island peak globally. The main rivers in Indonesia are Kapuas, Barito, Musi and Digul. The climate of Indonesia is chiefly tropical but with a high humidity, and it also experiences monsoonal rainfall. Now coming to India-Indonesia relations also, let us observe the pillars of cooperation between India and Indonesia. Why is it significant? From the economic point of view, we have significant bilateral trade as Indonesia is India's second largest trading partner in the ASEAN, and the bilateral trade in the fiscal year 25 was around $28 billion. India imports from Indonesia coal, palm oil and rubber. India exports the engineering products, etc. The Indian investments in Indonesia are significant in the sectors of mining, textiles and infrastructure. Also, there is a local currency settlement memorandum of understanding as well, and there are discussions ongoing to link India's UPI with Indonesia's QRIS, that is the quick response code Indonesian standard. And there is a joint exploration of nickel and bauxite for the clean energy production. Also, there is a promotion of the tourism link between Andaman and Sumatra. Strategically looking also, Indonesia is significant for us, as through the Act East policy and our Sagar vision, there is alignment with the Global Maritime Fulcrum Initiative of Indonesia. Plus there is a Sabang port project which is significant as it is near the choke point. And in terms of defense also, the ties are significant as there is the various exercises. For example, the exercise Garud Shakti, the army exercise, the Samudra Shakti, that is the naval exercise, and both countries advocate for the free, open, stable and peaceful Indo-Pacific. Also there is the India-Indonesia-Australia trilateral cooperation as well. Technologically as well, the ties are significant because there is cooperation in the quantum communication, cybersecurity, AI as well as space. Culturally also the ties are significant because the national language of Indonesia, that is Bahasa Indonesia, that has borrowed a large number of Sanskrit words as well. Plus the national symbol of Indonesia, that is Garud, it draws directly from the Indian mythology. Plus India has supported the restoration of the Prambanan temple in Indonesia, which is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and there is the establishment of various Indian cultural centers in Jakarta and Bali. Now coming to the article, India's transition to the electric mobility and clean energy requires the access to various critical minerals, especially nickel. And the world's largest nickel reserves, they lie in Indonesia, where Chinese investments are there and they have established a dominant position in the downstream processing. And the future of clean energy will also depend on the nickel processing plants as well as on the EV factories. Therefore, Prime Minister Modi's visit to Indonesia could offer India an opportunity to secure a place in the critical mineral value chains. And India also has the cultural links with Indonesia, with Java, Bali and Sumatra that stretches back to centuries, while the 1955 Bandung Conference also helped lay the foundations of the non-aligned movement. Today, this shared legacy finds expression in a strategic partnership spanning the Indian Ocean and the wider Indo-Pacific. The largest archipelagic state, Indonesia, straddles the Malacca Strait, one of the world's busiest maritime arteries, and Asia's two largest democracies share the boundary in the Andaman Sea, making cooperation on the maritime security and connectivity an imperative. The next article is related to Pandavani. This is important in prelims under History of India. Pandavani is a traditional folk narrative and musical performance, as the etymology comprises of the two words Pandav and Vani. The Pandavas were the protagonists of the epic Mahabharata, and Vani means voice or speech. So it is the storytelling regarding the Pandavas, and it involves the storytelling, music, acting and improvisation. And it is done through a dramatic narration, rhythmic singing and also expressive gestures. In India, the origins can be traced to the central India, especially Chhattisgarh, and also practiced in Madhya Pradesh and Odisha. The performance style and structure involves a solo act. That the solo act is done by a performer, although it is accompanied by a group of magicians. The narrative in Pandavani is built around the episodes from Mahabharata, whereby the adventures of Bhim, Arjun, Draupadi and Krishna are described, and it is interwoven with songs, dialogues and commentary. Although alongside with it, there is a musical accompaniment also. It comprises of a tambura or ektara, tabla, harmonium, manjira and kartal, which therefore provide the rhythm and the melody to the performance. Whereas tambura is not only a musical instrument, but it is also used like a symbolic prop in the Pandavani, that it is also used to represent weapons like Bhima's mace or Arjuna's bow. And it can also allow for improvisation. Pandavani allows for improvisation where the spontaneous creativity can be shown by the performer. The performer can also use the local humor, contemporary references, or even the social commentary as well. It relies significantly upon the facial expressions, body movement, as well as hand gestures. There are two styles of Pandavani chiefly, the Vedamati style and the Kapalik style. The Vedamati style is a more restrained and the traditional form. In this style, the performer simply sits and narrates. The performer narrates in a composed and devotional manner. The emphasis is more upon the storytelling rather than the dramatization of the narrative. Whereas the Kapalik style is more expressive. It is more expressive and theatrical, where the performer stands and moves around and also enacts the roles of different characters. Therefore, it becomes a lively performance, even humorous and at times even interactive with the audience as well. And it was popularized by the legendary Tijan Bai. And the prominent exponents of Pandavani are Tijan Bai, Ritu Verma, Usha Barle, and Shanta Bai. Particularly regarding Tijan Bai, let us observe a few facts. She was born in the Ganyari village of Chhattisgarh. She broke the social barriers as, despite being a woman, she performed a traditionally male-dominated art form. She had a powerful voice, dramatic style, and she had the command over the Kaplik form. She was also awarded with Padam Shri in 1988, Padam Bhushan in 2003, and Padam Vibhushan in 2019. The next article is related to Shyam Prasad Mookerjee. This is important in prelims under the History of India topic. Shyam Prasad Mookerjee was a nationalist leader, an educationist, and also a barrister. He was also the founder of the Bharatiya Jan Sangh. The Bharatiya Jan Sangh was the predecessor of the current Bharatiya Janata Party, and he was a critic of the Nehruvian policies. And therefore, he emphasized upon cultural nationalism, national integration, and placed more importance upon the self-reliance. Therefore, he was the youngest VC, the Vice Chancellor of the Calcutta University, serving from 1934 to 38. Initially, he worked with the Indian National Congress, but later on, the distances grew with the Indian National Congress because of the differences in the ideologies, and therefore, he became a prominent leader in the Hindu Mahasabha. After independence, he was also the first Industry and Supply Minister from 1947 to 1950, and he was also against the induction of the Article 30. And he popularized the slogan "Ek desh mein do vidhan, do pradhan aur do nishan nahi chalenge," that there won't be two constitutions, two symbols, and two chiefs in a country. Let us also observe the contributions of the SP Mookerjee. He contributed to the promotion of the Indian languages. As the Vice Chancellor, he encouraged the use of vernacular languages in higher education and therefore supported the greater recognition for the regional linguistic and cultural studies. He also contributed for reforms in the university administration, as the administrative and academic reforms were taken up at the Calcutta University. He also contributed for academic recognition and research, for example, the promotion of intellectual development, scholarly recognition through the university bodies and educational organizations. He was also playing an active role in supporting relief activities during the crisis time. For example, after resigning from the Bengal government in 1942 and when there was a flood, he was providing active assistance to the organizations like Ramakrishna Mission and the Mahabodhi Society. He had a contribution in the constitution making also, as he was a member of the Constituent Assembly, and he also gave advocacy for the protection of the minority in the East Bengal, and he contributed to the development of opposition politics in parliament as well, as he created the National Democratic Party group in the parliament. Also, he supported the Buddhist cultural heritage preservation, as he was the president of the Mahabodhi Society, and therefore at that time there was a facilitation of the return and preservation of the sacred Buddhist relics which were brought back to India. The next article is related to Gaganyaan. This is important in prelims under the topic General Science. Let us first discuss a few facts regarding Gaganyaan. The Gaganyaan is a 3-day manned mission which is planned to be sent to the low Earth orbit, the low Earth orbit of 400 kilometers with a crew of 3 people. It has a crew module which will be serving as the habitat for the astronauts, a service module which will be used for the on-orbit servicing. Now, what are the objectives of Gaganyaan? It is to promote the human space flights, conduct space exploration and also conduct microgravity experiments in future, which will be used for the development of medical science, for example. Now, what are the components of Gaganyaan? It has a human-rated launch vehicle Mark III. The LVM-3 is a modified version of the GSLV Mark III, and it comprises of a three-stage propulsion. The propulsion has the solid, liquid and cryogenic stages, and it has a crew escape system plus an orbital module. The orbital module further comprises of two modules, the crew module and the service module. Now, the crew module will serve as the habitable space with Earth-like environment. It will have the control system for the mission and the crew communication, navigation, guidance and avionics. It is also designed for re-entry into the Earth atmosphere. Whereas the service module will provide the necessary support to the crew module while in orbit. And unpressurized structure it is, containing the propulsion system, thermal system, power systems and avionics. Now, what is the significance of Gaganyaan? It will demonstrate India's technological capability, therefore will be able to explore the solar system and conduct sample return missions. And it will also inspire the youth of India to participate in the innovation, participate in the research and development. It will be important for our foreign policy also, as through this we will be able to earn collaborations for joint missions, knowledge exchange, etc. And it will serve as a scientific breakthrough. For example, we can conduct the microgravity experiments leading to discoveries in medicine, material science, etc. Plus, it will be important for our economic growth and employment generation also. For example, it will help in the development of the space related industries. Now, coming to the article, the ISRO has successfully carried out the first ground test of the SOLVE. SOLVE is the suborbital launch vehicle for experiments at the test facility in Sriharikota. The SOLVE solid motor is a key component for conducting the Gaganyaan test missions, and it will be a test platform to carry out the integrated parachute tests for the validation of the deceleration systems of Gaganyaan's crew module. During these test missions, the crew module will be carried to an altitude of 10 to 17 kilometers and separated from the vehicle. A series of 10 parachutes will be deployed to reduce the velocity of the crew module before the splashdown in the sea. The solid stage of SOLVE is derived from the PSLV strap-on motor with a few modifications to meet the Gaganyaan test requirements. Thank you.